President Trump is refusing to accept defeat in the election, with his campaign launching new legal challenges today. But first, the country is grappling with a record surge in coronavirus cases and hospitalizations. The country reported a record daily high of 136,000 new infections Tuesday. Less than 2 weeks into November, the U.S. has confirmed more than 1 million cases this month alone. That caseload is putting a strain on our nation's hospitals. According to the COVID Tracking Project, the U.S. saw a record number of hospitalizations Tuesday, with more than 60,000. In North Dakota, the state with the fastest growing spread, local media reports hospitals are at 100% capacity. The state's governor is allowing nurses who are COVID positive but asymptomatic to continue working. Election was projected for Joe Biden this weekend. He commemorated Veterans Day and visited Arlington National Cemetery to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Mr. Trump has yet to accept the election results. Our Paula Reed reports his legal team has not given up its Supreme Court challenge over ballots in Pennsylvania. But in court this week, they were unable to explain how the litigation will help them. On Twitter, a Democratic lawyer flagged one exchange where Trump campaign lawyers were asked if they were alleging fraud in connection with 592 disputed Pennsylvania ballots. The lawyer's response was, quote, "To my knowledge, at present, no." President-elect Biden leads by more than 50,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Election officials say only 10,000 ballots arrived within a 3-day court-mandated window after Election Day. Mr. Biden's popular vote lead has extended to more than 5.1 million. His 50.8% share of the electorate is now higher than any presidential challenger since Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932. Meanwhile, CBS News called the state of Alaska for President Trump today, earning him 3 more electoral votes. In addition, Alaska gave Republicans their 50th Senate seat. That means Democrats will need to win both of January's Georgia runoffs to clinch control of the chamber. Ed O'Keefe and Zeke Miller join me now. Ed is a CBS News political correspondent with the president-elect in Delaware, and Zeke is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Welcome. It's great to see you both. Zeke, let me turn to you. There's a lot of territory to cover with respect to what Republicans have and have not said surrounding the president's refusal to accept the election results. We heard both Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell focus on the fact that the Electoral College does not actually vote until December 14th as a reason to wait on acknowledging President-elect Biden's win. So help us understand how this works here, because for a lot of folks, a lot of Americans, the Electoral College is a bit of a mystery and a confusing sort of set of circumstances. But is there any way for Republicans to change the electors and impact the outcome here?
And the short answer is yes, they can. The question is, are they willing to really push it that far, and will they be successful? It would require a concerted effort across a number of those key battleground states that we've all been talking about for the last couple of months, particularly Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, some combination therein. It would require getting on board the state legislators from those states. There are Republican majorities in some of those states, which would give Republicans a bit of a leg up. But at the end of the day, though, doing that while potentially constitutionally allowable, though there are some Democrats who say, while it may be able to be done, and you'd essentially be overturning the will of the voters, and that would be a huge challenge. It would certainly be fought out of the courts for quite some time as well. But it would really undermine so many norms and processes, and the conception of the American presidency. Obviously, this is we live in a republic. It's not a direct democracy, but for generations, and going back, there has been no. You'd be hard pressed to find a situation like this where the voters will have spoken, and one political party or another were to try to overturn their will to try to keep and preserve power.
Yeah, I imagine there would just be such a backlash, especially given this climate that we are in right now. So I was just asking about what we know regarding the President-elect Biden's strategy here for dealing with the Trump administration when it comes to this resistance to the transition.
The plan is to just essentially plow ahead as if it's business as usual. He ruled out the possibility of legal action yesterday after some of his aides floated the idea of that, believing that ultimately things will work out. You got to remember a few things. First of all, he's somebody who has served in the White House, is familiar with how one works, has been involved in not only the 2008 to 2009 transition, but then, of course, the 2016 to 2017 transition. So he's got some sense of how these things work, and also is likely to surround himself with several, at least senior officials who have been down this road before, who worked alongside him in the West Wing or in the Office of the Vice Presidency, and have a sense of what it will take to put things back together in their view once they take over. But obviously, if we get into December and we're still sitting here having this conversation, I think that's a point at which not only public will, but also potentially legal action could compel them to try to move things along. Today, he did go to a Korean War Veterans Memorial up in Philadelphia, about 45 minutes from Wilmington, laid a wreath, and has otherwise been unseen. We are expecting to hear soon about other calls he's had with world leaders, probably on the Asian and Australian side of the world. So they may happen later tonight, morning their time. We'll see. And beyond that, we're just waiting to hear who does he want to be as White House Chief of Staff. We're going to be the senior West Wing advisors. Word on cabinet secretaries and positions like that is expected to come either later in the month or not until December.
Yeah, everybody's waiting to see who those folks will be. Well, Zeke, as the Trump legal team continues to allege voter fraud but fails to produce evidence, I want to go ahead and play a few clips from our Nancy Cordes asking Republican senators if they observed fraud in their races. Let's listen to some of that.
Was there any fraud in your race as far as you know?
I don't believe so. Iowa has a really great election system, and I trust the integrity of our process. It's
Do you
a good
suspect
system.
fraud anywhere else?
I can't speak to that, so I really can't.
Did you notice any fraud in your race?
I didn't.
But if the accusation is baseless, do you as an elected official have a responsibility to say so?
The courts have the responsibility to make that determination. We will allow the courts to do their work.
Was there any fraud in your Senate race or any Senate race that you know of?
I don't know. At the risk of bragging, it wasn't very close.
All right, so Zeke, help us understand the logic that's being presented here. Is the idea that fraud only came at the presidential level, not in the House races where Republicans gained, or in the 50 Senate seats that they've already won?
Not exactly logically consistent, and that is a persistent challenge here for Republicans and for the president. He's trying to allege some sort of large systemic voter fraud campaign that only seemed to target him. That if it would have been so effective, you would have thought that Democrats who walked into Election Day feeling pretty bullish about picking up seats in the House and winning back control of the Senate, they would have succeeded on that front as well. It is kind of a fanciful, allegation to begin with. But to think that if they had all of this power and all of this intent and all this ill intent, that they wouldn't have fully executed their plan to take full control of Washington, it just doesn't hold any water. And that is a challenge that the president's having. His legal team has filed this flurry of lawsuits that don't actually allege anything. There are a couple of complaints that they were not allowed to observe the tallying of votes, and there were live streams and other ways of observing some of those tallies. But there are really no allegations, no substantive, no proven allegations of any vote being changed. And if you look at the margins, particularly in Michigan, roughly 150,000 votes. In Pennsylvania, 50,000 votes in opening for the Biden lead there. If you look at there's never been any allegation of proven instance of voter fraud at that scale ever in American history. And it'd be hard, if it ever happens, it's only a handful of votes one way or the other. It is not nearly at that scale. And it's important context here that the president is challenging a outcome, margins that are far greater than the margin he won by 4 years ago. And if this is sort of becomes the new format of American politics, where there was a verdict that voters render on election day, and it becomes known a couple of days later that the losing party wants to extend that fight all the way until the Electoral College meets a month plus after election day, that's going to impact transitions. And that's not one of those things that just sort of stops with one political party. That can become a lasting change in the nature of how transitions of power happen in this country going forward.
And Zeke, with all the focus on the election outcome, I want to ask about the state of coronavirus aid from Washington. First, it was supposed to come before the election. That never happened. But is that something the White House is expecting on President Trump's desk before Inauguration Day?
Now, it is really unclear what, if anything, the White House is trying to do right now, other than try to overturn the outcome or erase the last week and a half of the president's political life right now. There have not been substantive communications with Capitol Hill, we've been told. A lot of the senior advisors at the White House, if they're not involved in the president's legal efforts to try to undo the election results, they are a lot of them are isolating or have been infected with the coronavirus. There's another outbreak here at the White House. The White House chief of staff and other aides have been dealing with that. So there's not a whole lot going on over at the White House, and there's been not a whole lot of priorities set for what the president would like to do before he leaves office on January 20th at noon. That will sort of come, once the White House hits the acceptance phase with the verdict the American people reach. That's when they can sort of prioritize what they actually want. Coronavirus relief, handling of the coronavirus more broadly. Right now, both of those things seem to be, we'll have to wait until the president comes to grips with the verdict that voters rendered.
All right, let's bring in CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joining us now. Hi there, Weijia. Great to have you. So I understand, Weijia, you have some new reporting on the White House Coronavirus Task Force, which has been pretty quiet for some time now. What are they doing in this post-election period?
Well, Zeke is exactly right. Whether it's the task force, whether it's other issues that have been on the president's agenda, everything seems to have been on hold. And we've been reporting for weeks now that they haven't been doing anything substantive. And we know that they had a meeting on Monday with Vice President Mike Pence, but senior members of the task force tell us that essentially this is all for show at this point, and they're not really doing anything that translates into action, especially with regard to public messaging, which is still such a problem and, is a big reason why the country has not been able to curb the virus, because the messages have been mixed. We've heard different things from different people, different experts. And so they're really trying to focus on therapeutics and vaccines and do whatever they can as a group, with the understanding that, now they have more flexibility to do things outside of the task force, things that they would normally be working on to try to contribute to leveling off this pandemic, because, again, there's been so much friction with the task force, especially with the arrival of the president's handpicked advisor, Dr. Scott Atlas, who is a radiologist, and sort of, sent things into a tailspin when he would say things publicly that varied from a lot of the members. So the bottom line is not a lot is happening that matters. And there's also a lot of concern that the president could try to start pointing fingers, as he has done before, and, acting on that by firing, for example, HHS Secretary Alex Azar or FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, because he is displeased, as we know, with the timeline of the announcement of that Pfizer vaccine. And so we're watching that as well. Obviously, the task force is made up of career civil servants and, political appointees. And so there's always been that friction. But really, it is unfortunately the public that is suffering here, because they're unable to really do anything because of all the lingering issues that seem to be worsening now. Even though the election is over, there's not much leadership, especially since the president and the vice president have been so focused on the election and continue to be focused on the president's legal challenges.
Well, Ed, I know you've been telling us about how the president-elect is looking ahead. Is he expecting to come into office feeling as though he needs to craft a stimulus plan, given what we know is the tremendous economic harm, in addition to the obvious public health toll that the coronavirus pandemic has taken?
If there isn't one passed before he leaves, then certainly, yes, it's going to be one of the most important things he has to do once he gets into office. There's some thought that he will consult with Democratic congressional leaders over the next few weeks in the event that talks do pick up again between Democrats and Republicans and the White House about some kind of measure. But it's likely to be more modest than what Biden would want. Of course, again, and we're going to say this a lot for the next few weeks, it'll all depend on what happens in Georgia. I don't think people yet have completely comprehended how important those two special elections are down there, because they will determine which party controls the Senate. If Democrats can win both of them, then they've got the majority. If they don't, Republicans have even more seats in their pocket and can withhold votes from a Biden administration and a Democratic-led House. So the dynamics of those races, plus the ongoing transition and the president doing his legal thing while Biden is preparing to take over, create a whole new set of ingredients for an already toxic brew in Washington. So yeah, if nothing has been done by the time Biden takes office, you would think absolutely this will be a top of mind concern. But if we've learned anything in the last few days as we talk to people who oversee presidential transitions, you may think today that something's going to be a big deal, but there could be some unforeseen disaster or development that comes in the next several weeks that is suddenly a far more urgent top of mind concern. And one can't imagine what that could possibly be, given what we're already facing.
Yes. All right. Ed O'Keefe, Weijia Jiang, and Zeke Miller, great to see you all. Thank you very much.